He's Chase Sr., I'm Harrison Graham. This is Any Given Thursday by Chat Sports. We go live every Thursday, 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific. Let's get you guys caught up on the latest on Ben Simmons, because what the hell else are we going to talk about? I mean, this team has been kind of reeling of late. So let's talk about the off-the-court stuff, and that, of course, Chase, surrounds one Benjamin Simmons.
Yeah, Sam Amick with a really good article in The Athletic, and when he comes out with an article, when Shams reports on Ben Simmons, Woj reports on Ben Simmons, you have to listen, because I don't get into the agent-driven propaganda, but I think you can take a lot of stock in what guys like Sam Amick report, because they're very tapped into a lot of these organizations in the NBA. So basically, to summarize what that article did entail, a 76ers source said, quote, "This is a multi-year thing. So Ben Simmons, because he's under contract over the next couple of years, might not get traded until Daryl Morey gets a very good player back. We know that." Also, according to some reports, Simmons has been practicing and scrimmaging with St. Joe's University, which is in the Philadelphia area. And then also, Amick went on to say that the Sixers have a list of 30 players that they would trade Simmons for, but atop that list, some marquee players who we'll break down here in just a bit, Harrison.
Yeah, so you look at what Amick said as well in this write-up. It does not appear any deal will happen soon. As it stands, Simmons isn't going anywhere until Morey is able to swap him for a truly elite player. And yes, in case you wondered, the Sixers have an actual list of such names internally. Damian Lillard is not only on said list, but appears near the top. Ditto for Brooklyn's James Harden, the former Rocket with whom Morey tried unsuccessfully to reunite with him in January. And by the way, could come to Philly via sign and trade this summer if he decides to shock the basketball world and leave Kevin Durant behind. He also added this. Also high on that list, Bradley Beal. A source with knowledge of the list said there are approximately 30 players that would satisfy the Sixers in a Simmons swap, and there's an internal belief that a fair amount of them, let's say 5 to 10, could become available in the next year or two. This is interesting, Chase, but I think you and I would agree, James Harden being near the top of that list has looked awful this year. He's out of shape. He's slow. The new rules don't benefit his game because he's not getting to the free throw line. Now, could he actually be somewhat realistic now, considering how bad he has been? I think you would at least have to consider him still if you're Philadelphia, but this does not appear to be the same player at this point in time.
No, and he turned down that 3-year, $161 million contract extension this past offseason, and I think when I've watched James Harden this year, he looks disinterested, he looks slow, he looks out of shape, and also the changes of some of the offensive rules in the NBA have negatively impacted his offensive game. He's always been a guy who likes to draw fouls, get to the free throw line, and also create some space with his body. Hasn't been able to do a lot of that this year. Look, last week we talked about that Jake Fisher report about Ben Simmons not getting traded until after the trade deadline, which would mean next offseason. And now there's this report from Amick and a Sixer source saying this could be a little while. I think everything can change very, very quickly, especially in the crazy landscape that is the NBA. And I think that Ben Simmons has an opportunity to up his value. The Sixers might have more of a glaring need if they continue to struggle, even when Joel Embiid and Matisse Thybulle come back off the COVID list. And there are other teams out there who could look at the current construction of their rosters and say, you know what, we could use one of the best defenders, if not the best defender in the NBA. We could use a premier talent and passer like a Ben Simmons. Let's make a deal for him. So I'm not going to jump the gun and say that Ben Simmons is going to be a part of this organization and just not flat out play over the next couple of years. It is still my belief that leading into the NBA trade deadline, a trade is going to happen. But for James Harden to be atop the list, yeah, he looks like shit this year. There's no question about that.
Well, while Ben Simmons' future is very much undetermined, making money is something we should always strive to do, and you can do that with our sportsbook partner, BetUS. Go to that link below, chatsports.com/bet. Use our promo code CHAT125. Put down $100, you can get $125 for free. Go bet on the NBA, the NFL, college football. It's fun. Producer Jack's a beginner this year, and he has made money this year. So, hey, anybody could do it. Chatsports.com/bet. Use our promo code CHAT125. This was pretty interesting, too, from longtime Philadelphia radio host Howard Eskin. Chase, I'll just read this and then we'll react. Yeah. I'm told Ben Simmons continues to work out, practice at St. Joe's at times with their team. So tell me why he can't practice and play with the Sixers. Would love an explanation from Benjamin, calling Ben Benjamin, and his agent Rich Paul. I assume playing with college player cures his mental illness. Also, the situation with the Simmons and the Sixers in the NBA is disgraceful. possible, but Simmons may now have created an issue for St. Joe's basketball. I reported he at times is working out and scrimmaging with their team. That is also what I've been told is someone within the NCAA, that it could be an NCAA rules violation, and of course it is. You can't have an active NBA player routinely practicing with the college basketball team. What is Simmons doing? What is St. Joe's doing?
Yeah.
It's just a disaster.
Yeah, and it's funny because Howard Eskin, otherwise known as the King, has been a pivotal figure in the Philadelphia media landscape for a long time. I used to listen to him growing up because I'm from the Philadelphia area. Shout out to 610. But it's funny because Ben Simmons is telling the organization, I'm not mentally fit to play. Rich Paul does that interview with Shams Charania and says, my client isn't going to take the floor until he is mentally equipped to play. So he can't partake in practices or play games or go on road trips with the Philadelphia 76ers. But if this report from Howard Eskin, who always likes to stir the pot, is true, then why isn't Ben Simmons mentally fit to play with the Sixers, but he can play and partake in practices with St. Joe's? Ben Simmons continues to be a flake. Ben Simmons continues to be someone who I cannot trust. Ben Simmons is a player who I don't want as a part of my organization, and Daryl Morey has to get a deal done soon, and I think he can get an all-star caliber player back for him. Some players we'll talk about here in a few moments.
Yeah, we mentioned that reportedly they've got 30 players they're willing to trade Simmons for, so give us a couple names. Who do you think the Sixers should trade Simmons for? We've talked about a lot of these names over the last several months, Chase, but I think the fact that that number is up to 30, if that's true, that should increase the likelihood of Philadelphia getting a deal done. That tells me they've expanded on the type of player they're willing to trade for. So let us know what you guys think that the Sixers could trade Simmons for in the upcoming future. So let's get to that part of this conversation, Chase. Bill Simmons on his podcast said that they turned down a Darius Garland plus Kevin Love combo for Ben Simmons. The Sixers turned that down. Could they trade him for a guy like Christian Wood? Simmons seems to think so.
Yeah, and look, if they turn down a deal for Darius Garland and Kevin Love, Love's been bad this year. Darius Garland has been really good. In the future, that might look like a bad trade turn down because Garland's been balling out as one of the better young offensive scoring guards in the NBA. You take a look at his numbers this year, north of 17 points per game without Colin Sexton in a lot of these games because he's down because of an injury. 6.5 assists. He's shooting north of 46% from the floor and 38% from deep. Darius Garland has been excellent. Kevin Love has not. Another down season for him. I'm of the belief, Harrison, that I think Kevin Love just needs a change of scenery. He needs to get out of Cleveland because his play has gone down and the injuries have gone up.
It's one of two things. That or he might just be done.
Yeah.
Like, it's possible
because of all those injuries.
It's nothing against him. It's just, I mean, he's in his 30s now. He's had a ton of injuries. He might just be done. I mean, he's a big guy who's had injuries pile up. That happens in the NBA. So maybe the Love aspect of that trade has been a turnoff for the 76ers front office. Christian Wood, a player you and I have talked about on NBA Now, our main Chat Sports channel before, he's been a great find for Houston the last couple of years. They signed him to a pretty team-friendly deal. He's a double-double machine. Now, he's not a huge name. He certainly doesn't have the ceiling of a Ben Simmons, but it would be interesting to kind of go big with him and Joel Embiid in this front court.
Yeah, no, and he's got a pretty interesting story. He went to UNLV as a pretty highly touted prospect. In 2015, he went undrafted. He actually spent some time earlier in his career with the Philadelphia 76ers and wasn't really able to find an NBA job. Played with the 87ers for a little while. But the last couple of years, he's turned into a really viable big man and a guy who last year was averaging around 20 points per game, a guy who can stretch his game out to the three-point arc. So if it comes to a situation where Daryl Morey is canvassing the landscape and they can't really find an all-star caliber player to trade Ben Simmons for, and you start to look at that second tier of guys, like a Colin Sexton, maybe even like a De'Aaron Fox, who I still think could be in that first tier. You're looking at guys like Christian Wood. I'd be intrigued by Christian Wood because of a couple of reasons. He could play the 4 as a stretch alongside Joel Embiid, but also with Embiid missing a lot of time over time because of all those injuries that he's dealt with over time, he could be a pretty good viable replacement at the 5 spot as well.
I wonder if you could get Wood and then one of those young pieces. You're obviously not going to get, I'm drawing a blank on the number 2 pick.
Jalen Green.
You're not going to get Jalen Green, but could you get one of those other young pieces on that roster.
Yeah.
I don't think you'd get a Şengün, but could you get one of those other pieces? Maybe they could throw Eric Gordon into the deal
Wouldn't
as well.
A shooter.
To get an extra shooter, I think that could be pretty interesting when it comes to the Sixers. But all I know, we'll keep you guys covered if you subscribe. YouTube.com/76ers TV. Stay tapped in with the latest 76ers news and rumors.